in the climate crisis, like we need to be really careful to not alienate people. And we talk a lot about indigenous knowledge. And really, when I was making the films with the farmers, like some of the farmers are from that land for generations. They speak the language of the land. They know every rock and every feature and what that's called in Irish. And it's so powerful to hear them talk about the land. So, they, like so many of the farmers that I've worked with, are really guardians of the land. They absolutely love it. They love it like their family, like their children, and they feel like it's their job to protect it.
What if we used art to fuel our imagination and create vision around the solutions of how to deal with climate change, a topic that is quite overwhelming for most of us? That is the mission of my guest today, Lisa Fingleton. Lisa is an artist, a filmmaker, a writer, and a grower of fruits and vegetables, which she does with her partner on a 19-acre organic farm on the stunningly beautiful west coast of Ireland. Lisa has spent the last 2 decades cultivating this deep-rooted connection between art and food and farming, and she uses these tools to foster really a sense of connection to the urgency around food insecurity, the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and the related forced migration that comes along with the other issues. Calling herself an artivist, Lisa engages in projects with the Government of Ireland, with the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and with other artists to help people relate to and better understand the challenges that farmers, and ultimately all of us, face in this new reality we live in. Lisa is a breath of fresh air, bringing a gentle, more intimate way for all of us to relate to something we tend to want to look away from, but we can't afford to. I know you're really going to enjoy this conversation with the artist and world changer, Lisa Fingleton. Hello, Lisa Fingleton. How are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Deborah. How are you doing?
It's great. It's great to meet you. You're my second Irish person who lives in Ireland, who I've interviewed, and for me it's like a total treat, so thank you. I'm excited for that alone. And as your voice gives away, if I hadn't just done so, you are from Ireland. You currently live in Ireland.
Absolutely.
The West Coast, right? You're off the West Coast, County Kerry. Is that where you are? All right. And you are an artist, a filmmaker. You and your partner live on an incredible, looks to me incredible, 19-acre organic farm in the west of Ireland. Looks very cold, I have to say, from your film. So is it very cold? Is it as cold as it looks?
Wet. Today it's wet, and lots of days are quite wet.
Yeah. It looked wet, windy, and cold, but spectacularly beautiful. So it makes up for whatever you have to put up with, I suppose. And so what I'm really eager to discuss, though, today is your art and how you have incorporated it with awareness raising around and solution raising around climate change. And that's really going to be this activism and how you combine it with all your activities and your proclivities and bring it into something actually so beautiful instead of something scary. So that's so I guess, is it fair to say that you're bringing imagining solutions to the climate crisis with your art? Is that how you would characterize it, or how would you characterize what you are doing?
I suppose it's bringing maybe imagination and vision to a problem that can be quite overwhelming, but it's to look at how can we imagine a different future, or how can we maybe imagine the solutions. I don't necessarily think it's artists' responsibility to enact all the solutions, but I definitely think we can help to work with communities to imagine what they might be, and they could inform policy then and action. I think the action part is very important.
Yeah. Well, but it's very interesting because honestly, I haven't heard much about this field before, or this idea, or this imagining. Did you come to this on your own, or was this part of the projects that you're involved in?
I suppose my partner and I, in terms of action, I suppose nearly 20 years ago, 18 years ago, we decided that we wanted to kind of work on the land and live as self-sufficiently and as sustainably as possible. So we were trying to imagine for ourselves what that might look like. And so that's how our project, The Barn Away, came about. But then in terms of my more professional arts practice, the government of Ireland set up a pilot project called, Creative Climate Action Fund, which was a really novel idea. As far as I'm aware, it's probably the first in the world. And it was to support artists to spark imaginations around, our future in terms of climate change and biodiversity loss as well, and what artists could contribute to that. So in a way, it was really brilliant because I looked at this job description and I thought, wow, that's what I'm doing. And now they've recognized that this is actually a job. Children sometimes say to me, paid to do this? Like, is this actually your job? You grow food and you make art. Like, that's a cool job. And I'm like, yeah, it is a cool job.
Well, it didn't come out of nowhere.
No, it didn't come out of nowhere.
In fact, I definitely want to dig deep into that whole project. But before we do, I'm just curious so neither your partner or you had been farmers before?
No, actually, I grew up on a farm.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we did a long history of farming. So I grew up on a farm near Dublin, so about maybe 70 kilometers from Dublin, 50 miles. And so my parents were really self-sufficient when we were kids. So my dad grew most of our food. My mom, like really creative, used to make our clothes, and they made our toys. They were really, really creative people. And Rena grew up as a market gardener in Ballybunion, the town where we now live. So her grandmother and her uncle and everybody grew food, and they used to sell food from the back of a pony and trap. Imagine, like a pony and cart.
The back of a pony and cart.
Lots of your listeners wouldn't know what that is.
No, I know. I'll have to catch you on some of your terminology. In fact, the Barn Away is the name of your. Is that the name of your farm, or is that just the name of the project?
That's the name of the project. The land, really interestingly, is called Barna, and Barna in Gaelic means gap. And
it's okay.
The Barna Darrig is actually the name of the land here, and that means red gap, and that's because of the hawthorn trees, we reckon. There's beautiful hawthorn berries. They're red berry that come in the fall. So it's really nice. We felt like we tried to think of loads of different names for the actual projects that we run here, but it kept coming back that it had to be called the Barn Away, and that idea that there's a way of being in the world that maybe is hopefully quite peaceful and connected with nature. And we've also made a way, but we can talk about that later.
Well, I was actually surprised that so many people speak. I don't know if you say Irish or Gaelic. Do you say Irish? What do you say?
I would say Irish, I suppose, or Gaeilge, Gaelan, depending on where you are,
But I think it's like nearly half the country speaks it, correct? I mean, at least as a second language, if not a first.
Yeah, it would be a second language, and we'd all learn it in school. So,
you do?
Yeah, so most people learn it from the age of, could be from a baby to 18. Yeah, at least.
Well, it's a pretty tricky one as far as I could see. I was trying to look up different things like Barna and so forth, and it's a more complex language than I knew. You don't hear it much.
Very different English. Very different English.
Very different. Yeah. And what do you grow on the farm? I'm just very curious.
So we grow a lot of vegetables, mainly it's a horticulture, organic horticulture. So we grow anything we can grow on the farm. We grow lots of pears and apples and tomatoes, salad leaves, root vegetables, lots of different things. And I suppose more recently, because of the climate crisis, we've been looking at how could we use our land to support nature more. So we have we're kind of keeping our meadows as native meadows, so we're supporting the flower growth as opposed to the grass growth. And we've also planted half our land in native trees, so native woodland.
That's what the native woodland is. Yes, I saw a reference to that. Okay, so and no animals? You don't grow animals? I don't know.
Not anymore. Not anymore. In the beginning, when we came here first, we were like, oh, what? As farmers now, as adults coming back to farming after being away for a long time, what do we do? And I suppose a lot of the models of farming are about animals, but we kind of felt more and more that wasn't really what we wanted to do, even though, there's a lot of policies and procedures that kind of make you do that. But we felt that it was important to grow more vegetables. And I suppose as the world is talking about moving more towards a plant-based diet, we were thinking, well, how can we maybe support that, you know?
Beautiful. Well, I love everything that you're doing, and I don't know if you're even aware of how we came together, but whether you are or not, there was this a young man named Dylan who works for the Irish Museum of Modern Art. Do you call it IMA or Emma?
Emma, yeah.
Emma, okay, in Dublin, and apparently he had seen one of our episodes on sustainable environmental couture, and thought there'd be some symbiosis between the work so they were preparing to do this festival at the museum called Earth Rising, and he thought that the show would have something in common and have an interest in because I think what they do, and I'll have you describe it, is they bring together like 50 artists and scientists and maybe farmers and knowledgeable people in the area, and have them all talk about climate change and inspire each other for a few days. Is that how it? Why don't you now take? That's a little bit of a jump where you can take from there to explain a little better.
Yeah, I suppose the Earth Rising is now in its second year, and it is run by the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and it's to engage audiences in like looking at creativity and climate and how artists maybe can, as I said, like inspire people and share skills. There's a lot of skills sharing in it. Like we learned how to make ropes this year. You know, like I did a big project at the National Ploughing Championship that I'm sure we can talk about in a bit. But yeah, it's to try and bring a variety of different voices and creativity, you know, because sometimes when we're facing maybe a big crisis as humans, we can forget that creativity is so important. Creativity's got us through so many things as humans. And I think it's really important to keep it center stage, you know?
I just appreciate that so much. It takes so much of the weight off the conversation, doesn't it? When you're talking about how can we bring art into talking about these things like climate change? Because I know that, for example, so the Irish government, I think, is sponsoring this, some of these projects, right, with a grant. And I mean, that as a government is so, it's a profound step in the right direction in my mind. I looked up after I saw it because I think they gave a $2 million grant or something to bring art and inspire artists and embed artists in the field so they can present, you know, conversations and highlight conversations about what we can do about climate change. And I looked up because I think Ireland and the US, we both have made this commitment. Our governments have made this commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030, which is very ambitious. And I think that's what spurred on this I don't know what we want to call it. I don't want to say in the United States, what it did is I looked up what our government has done because we don't have an Earth Rising or anything like that, but they did have an art contest. So we are trying to do something similar, it sounds like, with inspiring about 100 artists. So I don't know if that's a global movement.
Yeah. And I think what's been interesting about this is that it's very much focused on community, you know, that it's not just about creating a piece of art and leaving it there. It's not about that at all. It's about creating really strong connections between communities and artists. And it's not so much focused on the product of what's being produced, but it's a really focusing on the process and how, like if you're looking at in the States, you know, are there particular communities, you know, there's lots of communities across the States, whether it could be, you know, farming communities or mining communities or, you know, communities involved in, say, the more traditional industries that are now going to be impacted in terms of climate change. And they're going to be looking for different types of work and transitioning to a different type of future. So it's how do you work with those communities to really, really meaningfully look at how these issues are going to impact them and how things might be changed for the future. So it's a really kind of a powerful fund to, you mentioned already about artists being embedded and about that idea that artists are often embedded in communities. So you're actually in the community. And in my case, I've been working on another project now for 2 years in our own community here in Ballybunion, County Kerry. So that's very exciting.
Well, that it is very, very exciting. And why don't we just move into that now? Because I think it just it's an example for so many things that are needed, like community and working together and finding solutions together and then sharing it. So, yeah, do you want to just kind of start at the beginning of what your role is and what the project's about?
So would you like me to talk about the previous project or the current project that hasn't started yet? What do you think?
Oh, I didn't know there was one that hadn't started yet. Well, let's talk first.
Exciting.
Well, let's save that for future focus. And why don't we talk first about the one I didn't know had been completed either, but I know you've finished the film and so forth. So
yeah. So I guess like a lot of my work is about food and farming and particularly about local food. So I'm really interested in this idea. So if I'm somebody who wants to do something about the climate and I want to do something about food,
yes,
I feel food is a great place to start because we all eat. Well, generally we all eat.
So I think such an impact on climate change.
And it's a really accessible place for people to start, in my opinion, you know. So I had done I'd written a book called The Local Food Project about the impact of what we eat and how it can really help us live more sustainably. I'd also done a project called the Sandwich Project about the journey of a sandwich. And all of these things were kind of happening. And then there was this call out to work with farmers in a beautiful area called Dingle, which is just south of me here in Kerry. And it's a stunning area, beautiful land, beautiful landscape. And what they wanted to do was they wanted an artist to work with 10 farmers, a range of farmers. Some of them were sheep farmers, dairy farmers, horticulturalists, to look at how could we work with this group of farmers to transition to the future and what might that look like. So we spent a year working with the farmers and it was really interesting. And I think it's a really nice model for other people who want to work with communities to look at, you know, really listening to what their experience was. We were trying not to use any carbon to get there. And even though it's a long way from my farm to their farms, I was trying to get a public transport bus, cycle or walk to their farms and really listen to what their experience was. So yeah, it was really good. So I visited all the 10 farms on a few occasions, but then we also went to visit other projects that we thought were inspiring for them. So we visited other places who'd maybe diversified into ecotourism, or who had planted trees, or who had done really interesting things like making yogurts out of their milk as opposed to just selling the milk on to somebody else. Do you know that kind of thing?
Yeah.
So it was really, and then, but because of that, sorry, go on.
No, keep going.
And then because of that project, and because I'd been doing this work about the sandwich project, the journey of a sandwich, I had drawn this really large drawing on one of our national galleries, the Crawford Art Gallery in Cork, and they paid me to do a big commission there to draw a huge drawing. And then Creative Ireland, who work on this fund, they said, how about you and the farmers all come to the National Ploughing Championship? Now, I'm sure you wouldn't know what that is, but it's one of the largest events in the world. It's like nearly 250,000 people.
Really?
Come. Yeah, it's huge. I think it's between 220 and 250. It's a huge number of people who come to this farming event in September every year in Ireland. And it's certainly the largest in Europe. And they said to me, would you and the farmers like to draw farmers' ideas on the Government of Ireland tent at the, you know, it's a solid wall against the Government of Ireland tent, and it's 100 foot long, and you could draw for 3 days farmers' ideas about climate action and biodiversity loss. And I was like, yeah, why not? That sounds fine.
Sounds like a blast. Forgot what? The rain?
I forgot about rain. You know, I just beautiful and sunny for the first 2 days.
Yeah.
But it was such but again, it was about listening. It was about saying, listen, there's going to be thousands upon thousands upon thousands of farmers. Obviously, we could only talk to a few hundred. But if you could do anything, what would you do? So we drew their ideas. And I think in the beginning, the farmers were like, well, get rid of the red tape, get rid of the bureaucracy. And I drew up some of those things. But then I was like, well, really, like, what are the positive ideas? So once they saw we were serious about jotting down their ideas, they really came back again and again and said, listen, what about this? What about this? What about this? So we did fill the wall, and we called it the Creative Climate Wall in the end. And that's all well documented on my website and different places that people can have a look if they're interested in that.
And I'll put links to all your work, to your films and to that and to everything you're doing, because it's all fascinating for people.
Yeah. And you mentioned the film. So after that, the ploughing, so this was a huge wall, which then went to the festival that you mentioned, the Earth Rising Festival in Imma, because I suppose that's the thing about art, isn't it? Once you start on a journey, an idea, then it seems to feed itself. It almost keeps
Yes.
going.
It develops its own life. And
Yeah.
were people coming and talking about what they saw in there? Were you watching how people interacted?
Oh yeah, at the ploughing championship we had huge interaction. Actually, we had about 10, 12 people working on the wall. It was
You
just because
needed
there was so
more.
many people.
Yeah.
And then we brought it to the Museum of Modern Art. So it was dismantled and reinstalled in the Irish Museum of Modern Art. And that was really interesting because a few people have come up to me since and said, like quite a few people, and said, I met the farmers in the museum and I had
Mm-hmm.
really good conversations about food, and I changed my course, or I changed what I was doing in my job.
Really? That
Yeah,
quickly?
amazing. This was like a couple of months later when I met them. They were like, I went
Oh,
back
I
to
see.
and I changed my elective, or
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And then the museum also,
That's
because they did because there was the whole thing about, do we go vegan? Do we go plant-based diet? And a lot of our farmers are dairy farmers, and their milk, they produce milk. And they were like,
I
but if you
know.
do that all of a sudden, then
Right.
what
Yeah.
happens to farming in Ireland, or what
Yeah.
happens to farming around the world if we,
Yeah.
and Ireland, only 1% of our farms grow vegetables. So if Ireland was to go vegan in the morning, our whole farming industry would collapse because we're not catering for a vegan diet at the moment.
I see.
So
So,
yeah.
I think that and we'll talk about that film, and maybe if people can watch it. I'm not sure if it's accessible, the film that you made about, and I don't know if we've even actually quite gotten to talking about the film as much, but I found personally those stories that you covered from those farmers, and you're embedded with them for a year, and we can talk about that film. First of all, the photography is just mind-blowing. I don't think people will understand how beautiful Ireland is until they see it. It's just crazy. But to actually, farmers aren't traditionally the most on the progressive end of things. They've been doing the same thing for hundreds of years. A lot of the farms have been in the families. My family has a farm. My cousins still have a farm in County Cork, a dairy farm my grandfather was born on. So I know from my own family that generations and generations and generations. And yes, you might upgrade how you do things, but you went in with arguably people who would be considered maybe more conservative in terms of tradition, and everyone came. I mean, the growth that they had, it seemed to me, by watching your film, the growth that they had from just getting together and hearing one another's ideas about what they could do to protect their land, to preserve their land for future generations, to hear the stories from one another of how weather is impacting people, how climate change is impacting them today. I think today we aren't always aware. We hear storms and so forth, but it's been impacting farmers' life first and foremost around the world. So they're very aware, maybe more aware than most people. And they're taking steps. And it was just so interesting to look at, they're not going to change from being a dairy farm to being a vegan farm or whatever overnight, but they're going to take the steps that are necessary to make a difference. I found it very inspiring, very educational, and very hopeful.
Yeah, and so the film that you're talking about, Voices from the
Yes.
Field, that came from that project. So we did the project in the Museum of Modern Art, and that really excited people. They felt like
that was
they were able to
first.
talk to people. Yeah, so
I see.
because of that, we went home and they were like, something, if people could actually hear our voices directly, then we might have an impact, because people really enjoyed hearing our voices at the ploughing, and they listened at the Irish Museum of Modern Art. So why don't we try and make a film? So that's how that film that you're referring to came about. And then we felt, because the project was very much about trying to be fair and trying to give everyone an equal voice, that everybody had 7-8 minutes in the film to talk about what they felt was important. And I think in the climate crisis, like, we need to be really careful to not alienate people. And
Right.
we talk a lot about Indigenous knowledge. And really, when I was making the films with the farmers, like, some of the farmers are from that land for generations. They speak the language of the land. They know every rock and every feature and what that's called in Irish. And it's so powerful to hear them talk about the land. So, they, like, so many of the farmers that I've worked with are really guardians of the land. They absolutely love it. They love it like their family, like their children, and they feel like it's their job to protect it. So I think that's why this project was so successful, possibly because we try to honor that, and we try to go, like, tell us what your experience is and tell us what you think needs to happen.
Yeah. Very uniting, very uniting. And you're right, very authentic to hear that, like you said, Indigenous knowledge
Yeah.
and shared with people and the love that they have for the land. It's really, there's one man was talking about the fruit that they grow and how if there's even the slightest blemish that you're not able to sell it.
Yeah.
And it made me so sad because no one really understands what happens on a farm and how the food here we have something called ugly fruit, which you can buy a service to and they ship you all the fruit that's been damaged it's a little bit of a discount. And people love that because I think there's a thirst to get back to that, but
Yeah.
to get
And
back to the truth.
why do we call it ugly fruit?
I know, but you know what? It gets people's attention. It's a terrible name, but to people, if it has a blemish, it's ugly. But everyone, at least if it gets their attention and people buy it anyway, then I guess that's a good thing. But there's no such thing as ugly fruit or ugly vegetables or ugly trees. Anyway, so yeah, are people able to watch that film? Because some of it is in Gaelic or in Irish, but you have subtitles for that.
Yeah. So what we've done is it's the trailers and at the moment this week, the trailers and the documentary about the film and everything is available on my website, so people can look at that, and also on the Dingle Hub and Creative Ireland website, so we can have links to that.
Okay.
And then the really great news is it's going to be shown on our national broadcaster. So so that will be available on their player over the next couple of weeks as well.
Is that something though? Because what you're learning and what you're working on in all your projects, they are local. That's the beauty of them. They're as local as they can be, but they are instructive for the whole world. So is there a way that will be shown maybe at at film festivals or so forth, because they're powerful and helpful.
It's really like in a way that film is kind of totally international, because I think people would relate to it all over the world. And Vandana Shiva, whom I love, Indian activist, and she's a feminist writer, farmer.
Yes.
She's a farm activist, and she's really interesting. But she talks about the fact that the majority of the food still is being produced by small farmers. We're sold this myth that we need to have all this big monocultural, agricultural systems, but actually small farmers are still feeding the world and will continue to feed the world. So I think what's lovely about the films is that they do really speak to that across the planet. And the thing about it is, I find that you really need assistance, I've realized, as an artist, because you make a film and then you're on to the next project, and then you need somebody to actually put those into film festivals or follow up, because it takes so much time to get something out globally. And that's why I'm really interested in the fact that we'll have the national broadcaster, and it will be available online and hopefully available in different jurisdictions, that people will be able to watch it. And people can also contact me and arrange a screening. We can do that too.
Oh,
that's what's very exciting too about films, is that they can travel.
So, yes, they can. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
I would love to participate in something like that.
Yeah, that's great.
So what is your now, what are you working on? You said you have a new project, but so did you just finish that film?
That film is just new. Yeah, that film is just this year. And so it's just new. And we've been organizing events in different galleries in different cities to try and get people to have the conversation, because that's what's nice about screenings. We can look at things online, but actually the power is the first screening, we did like 100, I think we did full capacity, so it was over 100 people, and then the second one was 120 people, and the conversation's really rich in that environment. Then you really get to hear people's questions, hear people's responses, and it's really good. But obviously having things online then makes it available to a wider audience again. So that's really exciting.
Different benefits, but I do think that and in fact, one of the things that every single farmer said that and every single vignette was the community that it brought to them, and how, because it is lonely being a farmer. You have this huge land and you're working so many hours a day that the opportunity to gather has maybe diminished. And there was a lot of joy from every single person in talking about what they're learning from other farms. Even if they're a vegetable farm and somebody else is a dairy farm, it didn't matter.
And I think that's maybe that I'm really glad you picked up on that. And I think maybe that's what you're doing with your podcast as well. You're trying to bring people together with a common cause. And I like that about what you're doing, because the farmers all said that that was the commonality. They learned loads, but actually what they valued most was the fact that
Yes.
we were making friends. And it sounds like we talk about making friends when we're children, but actually as adults, we've become so isolated, and we're all on our
So,
phones, and we say, oh, we're
right.
communicating. But are we
Yeah.
really communicating, sending
Yeah.
emojis and, spending all this time on screens?
Yeah.
And that was the joy of going to visit people's farms, making food and bringing it neated together, making art together, drawing together, going to the National Ploughing, going to the Museum of Modern Art. We're
Yes.
still doing all that. We're still meeting each other. We all went to the Museum of Modern Art there again this year.
Oh,
And the
that's awesome.
fun, the
Yeah.
fun.
Fun,
And
yes. Oh,
yeah,
that. Our
what?
the Surgeon General, which I don't know if you have an equivalent in Ireland, but it's like the highest medical person in our government, and they usually set the agenda for what is wrong with the country, like the greatest concerns, like what used to be smoking, and then of course COVID and everything. But now the number one concern in our country is loneliness and
Yeah.
isolation, and they're literally naming it and saying we have to address this issue. And because you're doing it in such a organic way, not to keep using that word, but because you're working on a project together that helps all of them, but it helps them in that way as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's really an important
It's so
lesson.
important. And that's another reason why I like to work with food, because food is
Mm-hmm.
something that, like, I do, or I used to do, I haven't done it, I didn't do it this year, but for 7 years, I did a local food challenge where I only ate local food, inspired by Barbara
Oh.
Kingsolver, where she
Mm-hmm.
did that challenge for a year, eating local food. But the idea that you
Oh, I
can
didn't know that.
bring people together to eat local food, maybe in your local community, that, people across, America in this instance, maybe could start looking at, well, what food is growing in my community? And could we maybe in September, in harvest season, try and make meals together that's actually celebrating the local
Mm,
food? Because ultimately, I love the expression, if you every euro or every dollar you spend tells the world how you want it to be. And if
yes.
you're spending your dollars or your euros supporting local growers, you're enabling that grower to stay growing.
Yeah. And I know that was a concern of one of the farmers, was that pretty soon vegetable farmers may be gone from Ireland because everything's being imported. And then of course that brings with it the cost of, climate change. You're spending more on you're creating more greenhouse gas emissions every time you buy something from another country. So, the push, and I hope the Irish government is as invested as the farmers are on supporting local growers, so that won't become an issue. And it's a very mixed bag in our country, so I'm not sure.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned him. Aidan O'Connor was the farmer that you're talking about there, and he was the only grower that we had out of our 10 farmers, and he went out of business. He stopped growing. I'm
Just
sorry
since
for bad
that was
news.
that is bad news. Was that
Yeah.
just last year? Since
Yeah,
then,
this year he was growing since he was 13. Yeah.
can you explain to me that breaks my heart? Absolutely. I
Well, you
hate
think
that
about it
story.
is, I have a drawing here. I think this is that the one of the drawings here, like, is, like, there's no such thing as cheap food. We think, like, that's the thing that's probably been sacrificed most in our lifetime, that the price of food is not the real price of food. So
Right.
we spend more on our phones now than we do on our food, even per year. Like, people spend more on their phones,
Wow.
So we've got, so
Wow.
we're advertised to so much that we think that that's normal, but that isn't normal, and that is not sustainable for farmers. So, or even like drinks prices. Like, say, wine or gin and tonics, whatever. That's prices inflating all the time, but food prices
Hmm.
are going down. So a lot of things I don't know about.
Artificially.
Oh, completely. They're
Yeah.
they're sold below cost to bring people in and say, "Oh, look, you can feed your family on this food." But actually, what's happening globally is that the control of food is going to fewer and fewer and fewer companies. So the same companies now control, the pesticides and the all the things that are used to control food. They control the seeds, and they also control the distribution of food. So we really need to protect our food systems if we want to be self-sufficient and have, they call it food sovereignty, going forward, that we
Yes.
actually have control of our food systems. So it's that is the single biggest thing. So when people say to me they're buying their local food boxes, or they're getting up on a Saturday morning and going down to their farmer's market, that is actually a really radical act that needs to happen. And radical comes from the word root. It comes from radix. I don't know which way it is, radical radix, but it's
That's
about going to
interesting.
the root of a system that you're actually
Yeah.
going, I can, with whatever little money I have, I can go out
Ah,
and I can support this farmer, this grower, because I understand that this is actually a really important thing to do. This is challenging the food systems that say I have to eat food that's completely pumped with water and wheat and sugar and all things that are causing problems for all of us. And I can go back and have clean food and support someone to grow that. It's really important.
I am so appreciative of you just describing that whole scenario, and that what a strong vote that is to buy at a farm. People think sometimes that it's just sort of a fun thing to do. It's sort of different or whatever, but it's really important. And
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this too much, but I'm very curious. I still don't understand why would he go out of business? Why are they importing it from other countries? Is that who he lost out to?
Well, interestingly, in the film, he talks about, like, it's like your equivalent of your ugly carrots. Like, he lives in an area called the Maharees, which is now going to be doing another climate project like we did. So it's an area of land that's on the sea. So it's going to be very
Oh,
impacted
that,
by climate change.
yes.
So if you can imagine, he has carrots growing, and they're growing in sand, and when the wind blows, the carrots blow. So the carrots are bendy carrots, and people don't want to
Yeah.
buy bendy carrots. It's like your ugly fruit. And so he thought, okay, well, how do I sell bendy carrots? I make juice. So then he started
Hmm.
juicing. But he also realized, and he talks about this in interviews and different things. He says, like, he did a market earlier this year, and he was trying to show you. They brought a school group, and the children didn't know what tomatoes really were, or what turnips were, or and he was just like, the
Wow.
disconnect. I can't. He was trying to do it because he knew how to do it, and he was thought it would be good for generations to come to still have Irish grown food. But he was like, I can't do it on my own. I can't do it. I cannot sell a bag of carrots for 49 cents. I just
Right.
can't do it. It just doesn't. And I've heard farmers being interviewed where they say it's cheaper to plow the food back into the ground than it
Mm.
is to pick it and bag it. So
Oh,
we really need to think about, and that is not to not acknowledge the poverty that people are living in, but we could stop
mm.
subsidizing the poisoned food or the food that's not clean,
Yeah.
and really support the food that is clean, and say that we really prioritize, especially people who are living in marginalized communities, and say we need and we understand that those children and those families need access to this really clean, good food for their health and well-being. And that's where we're going to put our money in the future. That's what we're going to invest in.
Well,
And
we're talking about climate change. There's a new film that just came out called oh my gosh, Common Ground. It's just been released in the U.S. through. I went to a screening of it, but hopefully it will be very available. Their first one is called Kiss the Ground, and what you learn, and I'm sure you know this already, especially as a farmer, is that when we put all those chemicals and the large growers are, tilling the land and putting in the chemicals, and how much that contributes to climate change and the degradation of the soil.
yeah.
So altogether, there's so many reasons why we have to look at the small farmer and doing things more natural way. We just can't keep closing our eyes.
No, and
But
I think people are very concerned. Like, everyone I talk to has somebody in their family who's been impacted by cancer or serious illness, and they're like, "How is this happening?" And this person might have been a very healthy person, and
right,
here is this stuff coming from the atmosphere. And yet, as we speak today, Europe is considering renewing the license for glyphosate. You know, even
they
though we
are.
know that it's
Oh,
what do they call it? Probably carcinogenic by the World Health
oh,
Organization. So they're the kind of things that, even though people say, oh, politics and art shouldn't go together, but I really think
oh.
we can use art and we can use drawing to think about, well, is that really what we want for our children, for generations to come, that we're saying our food systems are dependent on this spray of poison into our food? Is that really
Hmm.
what we want going forward?
Yeah, and contributing to the greenhouse gases as well. All right, I'm going to shift us to a happier conversation for a moment, which is so tell me about your next project, because I have no questions for you, because I'm not aware of it. So you
Yeah.
can
So
just let her rip.
So what was fabulous about doing the project with the farmers is that it was really successful, and we still have a great
Yeah.
rapport, and it also, the farmers are all doing really exciting things now. One of them's involved in
Mm,
wool, and how Irish sheep farmers can maybe have a market for their wool because there was no market. There's people growing native
mm.
trees, and one of the women farmers, she went on to do a sustainable agriculture course and is now running that course. So it's just been
Wow.
amazing in a couple of
Big
months.
changes. Big
Huge
changes.
changes. Yeah, and
Mm,
even like Aiden, who's not growing vegetables himself anymore, he's growing vegetables with somebody else, but
oh,
he's got a
good.
solid income now, and he's happier about that, and it's so it
Oh,
is all positive in some ways.
oh,
And I suppose
that's
he's
good.
made the decision. So you're and then because I suppose of the success of that project, our local community here called Ballybunion, which is a seaside town in Ireland, we were thinking, well, what could we do to maybe look at issues around particularly biodiversity and
Hmm.
food systems in our local town to make us more sustainable and future proofed, I suppose, in terms of the future.
Yeah.
So we've been successful in getting a large scale project for 2 years to work with, again, a small number of community collaborators to look at what can we do. So we'll be looking at how do we protect, for example, the seas around us, so that
Oh,
they're a good habitat for our dolphin. We've 140 dolphins living around the river and the
mm,
sea here in Ballybunion, and their lives are
really?
becoming more and more challenged because of climate change and rising water
Yeah.
temperatures. But also the food systems then, our maybe our water systems are not as clean as they should be because of runoff from farms or from villages, and that is impacting on our water. And also, what biodiversity do we have living in the area that we need to protect, and how do we
Mm,
how do we make habitats, or how do we reinstore
mm.
habitats, to make sure that that we share this part of the
Wow.
world with the creatures. So it's
Yes.
really exciting. I mean, it's literally
Yeah.
just starting. I mean, it was signed off last week, so it's brand new. It's called
Oh,
Brilliant Valley Bunyan. So watch this space.
really? So what is your role as an artist in that project?
So my role as an artist will be doing a lot of drawing. So we'll be based here on our farm, which is the
Hmm.
Barnaway, just outside Ballybunion, and also in the town of Ballybunion. So what we've done is we've built a little eco art center here on our farm, and the people who are involved in the
Oh,
project will be coming here to try and, like, I suppose, connect with nature. And sometimes people can say, "Oh, what's that going to change?" But actually, connecting with
oh,
nature is so important, because so many people don't have that privilege anymore. So many children grow up and they don't get to lie in a meadow and look up at the sky. I mean,
yeah,
basic things that we grew up with.
yeah.
So it's really, so we're going to do lots of drawing projects here. My partner and I are going to show people how to grow food themselves. We'll be going out on the sea, probably looking at the dolphins, and looking at the impact of
Hmm.
water pollution, but also, rising water temperatures and all that kind of thing. And then my role will be literally working with people to show them how to draw and use creativity, because also it can be a bit depressing. I mean, I know we're a conversation, we're smiling and we're laughing a bit, but it is very serious, and it can be a bit depressing. So how can we use creativity to process the emotion of what we're feeling?
Oh,
Um,
really? That's
yeah.
interesting.
I don't know if you've heard of a term. There's a term by a man called Glenn Albrecht called solastalgia.
I
And
just learned it. I mean, I've heard it called eco grief before, but I haven't. Is that the translation for that word?
solastalgia, and
Yeah.
it means, the deep grief we feel when we see
Yeah.
that our little biosphere around us, or the ecology around us, is getting damaged. And some people have had that experience already, where they're looking at, maybe, I know people, they look out their window and they had a little meadow, and then suddenly some developer gets money for that, and there's no meadow there anymore, and they're like, oh my goodness, this used to have deer and fox and
It
all sorts
takes
of
its,
things living
it
in it.
takes a toll on us, it
And it's really
because we.
good to have a name for that. I think
Hmm.
that
It
solastalgia
is.
is a really kind of a mix between nostalgia and and
Yeah.
and something else.
Yeah,
But
it's a good word. It really is. And I think I must have just read it on your website or somewhere, something, since I've been looking at your work, because I've heard eco grief, but I haven't heard that exact word. And it's so much better because the nostalgia
yes,
part of it is so big.
so I'll be working. You were asking me what I'll be doing. Like, I'll be
Yeah.
working on work myself, like in terms of my studio, and trying to process what's going on. But I'll also be supporting people to think about it for themselves. And I think with this climate crisis, like, it's how do we tap into whatever creative gifts we've got?
Hmm.
So all of us have something. Like, I often say to people, do you sing in the shower? And they're like, oh yeah, I sing in the shower, but I don't sing outside the shower. I'm like, well, maybe you should start singing outside the shower. Because we all have gifts. Like, I believe
Yeah,
everyone is an artist, and everybody
absolutely.
can use their creative gifts. So whether it's making a podcast that you might make, you might think, I'm concerned about this. What can I do? Will I write a
Hmm.
poem? Will I write to my local newspaper? Will I sing a song? What will I do? Or
Yeah.
how can I express this? So I'm
Hmm.
not just adding to the trauma and the upset about it, but I'm actually maybe helping it, because I'm raising awareness about what's happening with the planet, and I'm supporting the planet, and I'm supporting other creatures who don't have a voice. I think
Yeah.
that's the power of art.
It is the power of art, and I think what you've done that changes you, and you and yours have done that changes the conversation so much. I have not seen this positivity or this expression, using art with climate. I mean, I interview people all the time. I read about it. I'm plant-based myself. I have been since 2011. I mean, this has been on my mind for many, many years. Um, I haven't seen much art, maybe a song, but not even many songs. So I think in fact, there was a singer on one of your, uh, where did I see that? A woman singing with a guitar. It was such a beautiful song. And
Was it me singing on the film? Was it me singing "The Water Is Wide"? I think it was.
I don't know. It was I don't know. It wasn't you, but, uh, I okay, maybe it wasn't part of as I was searching through some of um your films and your websites, start following a thread.
Yeah.
There was an Irish woman just singing a guitar, but I can't remember the
I
name
think
of
it
the
was
song.
Katie O'Connor, maybe.
It
Katie
was,
O'Connor.
it was.
Yeah, well
Yes,
done you.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
wrote during COVID, I wrote a book called The Last
That's what
Hug
it
for a
was.
While. So this was the one you
Yes.
were talking about. This is it, the local food, The Last Hug for a While. So
Yes, what a
again, about
name.
like processing. How do we process things? I was like,
Yes,
COVID, we got really sick. My partner still has, implications from
really.
it. But I just felt like, as an artist, I was thinking, I just need to process this. So I ended up writing poems, which I've never done before, and writing songs. And Katie O'Connor's a wonderful
Mm,
singer. Oh, she's a,
beautiful. Yes.
and that was a song that I wrote called "The Last Hope for a While." And she sang it, and it was just, it was beautiful. Yeah.
Have you done work internationally? I feel like your voice is so important, and your ideas are so important. And like I said, I'm just not seeing this level of combining art with the things that I mean, yes, with things that we're feeling, but especially with the heartache of the climate and Earth and everything, not just the climate change, but like the biodiversity loss, who knows, maybe COVID is related to that as well. Um, you know,
It's really funny, because I mean, I tried to do the opposite. I'm trying to be present on the land and not
I
travel.
hear that. Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why I wrote the two books. So I wrote the local food project, thinking, wow, I can't keep up with all these requests to go places, and that defeats the purpose.
Oh,
But what I try to do is I try to fit things
yeah.
in. So if I'm asked to go somewhere, I try and fit something else with it, and try and
Mm-hmm.
maximize the audience, so that it's at least, that it's worth the travel. And I don't mean that in any disrespect to the people who turn up, but I mean,
Oh, no, no.
if you're going to have an in-person experience, it's good to make that
Yeah.
as big as possible, so that you impact
Right.
people. And I suppose that idea that things can spin off from that, because I do think there is a real value in meeting people. There
There
is a
is, but
yeah.
we are meeting, and I think that, and your voice is being, shared now. Like, not this is the world's biggest podcast, but this is the way that you can share. I really appreciate that you are, you know, walking the talk, because you're saying it's important to be local and to be working in your local
Yeah.
environment, and that is what you're doing, and by traveling you interrupt that. So I appreciate that. But even like I said, this is one way to do that, is just to share your voice and share these ideas.
Yeah, and I think, like, you can do things in a kind of concentrated way, like, so, like, I had an exhibition last week, but we ended up having the exhibition along with talks, along with workshops for kids, along with workshops for teachers, so that the impact of me being away for a week it was only in Ireland, but it was just, I was away, but I was very conscious that to be away now, because we have 20 acres here, we have a project here,
Oh,
that it really
yeah.
needs to be quite concentrated and have the maximum impact that it can have. And I suppose that's why people say to me, why do you put so much stuff on your website? Like, why have you got all your, like, not all your films, but why is there so many films? And I'm like, because I make them
Mm,
so that people will be able to access them wherever they are around
yes.
the world. And they
I
don't,
don't,
not everybody has the privilege of transport that they can get to a museum, or it's important to me that people can see them. And if people want to see other stuff, they can email me or they can contact me and say, Lisa, do you have other things on this topic? Could I look at it? Because some of them are
mhm.
private links. There's about 40 films, but a lot of them are still private links, but I can still send them to people if they need them, you know.
No, I think it's a wonderful way to communicate your thoughts. And, for example, I would encourage people to reach out to new communities. For example, this young man who wrote me from the Irish Museum of Modern Art. I look at what it started, and now learning what you're doing, I want to take. Like I said, the United States is apparently there's a contest. And I don't know much more about it. Unfortunately, it's run by the government. It's on a government website, and it doesn't have much touchy feeling to it. But I don't know what they're going to do yet with the artwork that um, they've inspired. I'm sure it will be something wonderful. But it encourages me to want to go to our local Museum of Modern Art and say, look at what they're doing. We have a lot of farmers in our state. Why don't we try to do something similar?
Yeah.
And that's the value.
And I think that's what's happening here. Like, we talked before this interview about like influences, and an artist that I know here in Ireland called Bernadette Kiley. Like, her work is all about food and farming and flooding, and I know that her work is going to reach an international audience as well, because it's of the time. It's of
Hmm.
a lot of us have been making work for, like, me, whatever, 40 years, 50 years, but I feel like this work is not going to have the same audience, until
No.
everybody realizes that these are the issues of our time. And that's why I wanted to make the books, because I thought I just want them to be documents. And when
Hmm.
and yes, they've sold, the first one sold out immediately, and then I had to get it redone. But I
Which
feel
book
like
are you talking about? The Hug or the other
no, I'm
book?
talking about the local food project. Like, it's like
Do you
people.
have that with you? Can you hold that one
Oh,
up?
sorry, I can show you that. Yeah, this is the local food project, but unfortunately that's almost sold out. I will make another run of it. But it's more.
Oh,
It's not about so much being sold out, but it's just that when I wrote it, a lot of people were saying, like, food. Why would you focus on food? And I'm like, because food
really?
is, yeah, like, food is really, as an artist. They were like,
Yeah.
why would you
Oh, I
be
see.
an artist and just be focusing on food? And I'm like, because food is, well, I love eating, but food is also
Most people
so.
do.
And I think with Bernadette's work as well, Bernadette's been making these paintings that are, talk about nostalgia. Actually, this is a postcard, just happens to be on my desk, but say this is one of her images. So you can see these are the cattle in the water. And, a lot of her
Beautiful.
work is about flooding. So they're not about what some people stereotype of art is, about painting pretty pictures. They're actually really
Hmm.
challenging paintings. But I can see, like, work like that being really in demand, so that people, we had an exhibition together recently, and it was farmers who came to the exhibition, and they sat and they watched the 80 minutes of my film, and they looked at Bernadette's paintings, and it was almost relief of somebody's talking about this, and
And somebody
galleries.
hears it.
Seriously.
Somebody hears it and cares about it.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. And I
You
think
know,
that's the role of
yeah.
galleries, isn't it? That they can, galleries are, it's unfortunate because galleries often take a long time to catch up with the current, because
Mm,
they're museums and they're institutions. So
yeah.
this year the national, collection of Ireland bought 7 pieces of my work. But
Oh,
they're,
really?
because they're interested in supporting, like, work that's looking at climate change. But it'll be another maybe 50 years before the national collections and the galleries and everything are
Yeah.
making, exhibitions about this time. But I think it's a real urgency now that they start,
It's an
taking on these.
urgency, and yeah, and I feel like it's definitely helping people who can't relate to this topic. Nobody wants to read a scientific report. Honestly, I don't. When I see the new climate change reports come out, they're so upsetting to read, and they're not that available either, like emotionally, or even, if you're not a scientist, sometimes it's hard to read them. And to put it into something, and the beauty of the film that you made with the farmers, I know I keep going back to it, but I hadn't realized. I wrote a book about what's going on with people in the South Pacifics, like in Tuvalu, which is about an island that's sort of disappearing due to climate change and has been for a while. That's what I think when people, especially in the city, like where I live in Denver, Colorado, United States, most people, we are completely, other than the storms, removed from how current this crisis is. I was surprised, for example, to see the one farmer having to rebuild his walls all the time, which is what they're doing in Tuvalu because of the ocean currents. But this is happening right now and has been happening right now
Yeah.
around the world, and we're removed from it. So whatever way we can let people know this is real, this is happening, this is affecting lives today,
Yeah.
and everywhere on the west coast of Ireland and in the South Pacific and in all
Yeah.
over.
And I mean, like the thing that gets me up every morning is the fact, and doing this work is the amount of people in the world who are displaced already. Like there's, as we speak, there's, well, before the war now in Israel and Gaza, there was 110 million people displaced. There's more displaced now, and they're displaced because of war. They're displaced because of climate change. They're displaced because of so many different things. But that's set to get worse. And
Mhm.
oftentimes the people who are most poor on this planet are living in the most vulnerable places. They are the ones who were forced to live in shanty towns on floodplains, or we did a beautiful project this summer with refugees from Africa, refugees and asylum seekers. And one man said to me, he said, I was a farmer, like I loved farming, and we had
Mhm.
200 sheep, but we didn't have rain for 3 years.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's here. We need to talk about it. We need to process it using art. We need to share about solutions. Using art is a wonderful, wonderful way to do that. So you are inspiring people in a global context. And as you look forward, though, what do you see for yourself and for your farm and for your personal work? Are you going to continue on doing more art? Are you going to continue growing
Oh,
vegetables on your farm? You're going to stay there. You're there for the long haul.
well, it's really nice. Like over the last couple of months, particularly, I suppose there's been a lot more global interest. Like a lot of people connecting. I'm involved in
Hmm.
more global projects, even online.
Huh.
So talking to people. But I think for me, it's really interesting. Like when I was small, like I used to draw all the time, but I didn't have value on them. I didn't think that they were really serious drawings,
Yeah,
And I
of
realize
course.
now that people, the simpler the drawing, the more people are attracted to it. And it's
Oh,
really interesting how drawings have actually brought people into my life from all over the world because they seem to transcend. Yeah, and that's really beautiful. And that to me is the power of art, and
huh.
how my confidence as an artist, like I'm now in my 50s, and I would still be kind of going, oh, is this good enough, is this good enough? But like little simple things, little simple drawings. I'm trying to think what's here, just simple things can, like this one, this came to me one day. I was thinking about the farmers, and I was looking at this poor man talking to his cow
Oh,
and saying, where do we go from here, like genuinely. where, where do we go? And that drawing, I don't know how
wow.
many places that drawing has appeared. Do you know?
Really?
Yeah, so it's really,
It maybe because people are, and I might include myself in this, intimidated by high level art. Do we understand it? What is the artist trying to say? Sometimes, like you said, that cow and that man, it's like you don't have to guess anything. It is right there for the
yeah.
taking, for the understanding.
Yeah, and,
That,
art can be anything. Art can be like, artists don't have to make work that is, simple and understandable. They can make it as complex as they like. But I just felt that maybe in my life I didn't value what I did enough. I didn't
mm,
know that the immediacy of what I did could have such impact. Do you know? That sandwich
yeah.
project that I did years ago, that drawing has just gone everywhere. It was just a simple thing. I picked up a sandwich. I think I have a thing of it here. I picked up a sandwich, and I didn't know how many ingredients are in a BLT sandwich, Deborah. A bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich.
You'd think three with a little mayo, and maybe
43.
four, five.
43.
Uh,
These were the ingredients. And then I started thinking, like, I didn't plan to do this, but then I was like, oh my goodness, I started drawing it. And I started drawing the sandwich and all of the journey of the sandwich, to think about like all of the people around the world who are impacted in making this sandwich. And so that one
mind-boggling.
drawing has literally gone from project to gallery to everyone,
Really?
you know? So it's I suppose what I'd like to say to people is never underestimate the
Yes.
power of an idea. I just wrote a short story about Walter the warlord, you know, so because I'm trying to understand like how have we become so war minded and why are we spending trillions and trillions on war and weapons when that would feed everybody in the world? I think they said Oxfam said 42 times over the money we spend on war. So why do we do this? So I've written a short story now, just last week actually, on Walter the warlord and how we can maybe infiltrate these systems of war in peaceful ways. you
You
know?
know, do you use your art to help you understand a problem? You know, like whether it's what you just kind of said, like you were struggling with why is this incredibly difficult to understand concept of spending all the money on war and making people suffer and making other people suffer because they don't have the benefit. Like, and we grapple with these things. Like, how can that even be a thing? Why do we accept this?
Yeah.
Just writing and drawing and what all the artistic endeavors that you have, filmmaking, do they help you understand it and help you grapple with problems?
Um, I think the first thing I need them to do is maybe just to help me process it a little bit, yeah, to understand it.
Process it. Yeah.
But I also feel more and more that, you know, I have a voice, like we all have a voice. And I feel like,
Mm.
how can I use my voice? And when I was younger, I was like more of an activist. I was involved in lots of community groups and working
Mm.
around anti-racism work and human rights work. But but I used to get really upset about the reality of people's lives, and I
Yeah.
couldn't separate myself enough to be really
Yeah.
effective as a pure activist. So now I call myself an artivist. So I use art, so I can actually create a little bit of a step back where I can hear and I can listen to the things that are going on in the world. But then my little creative head comes in and it starts going, ooh, could we tell this story or could we draw this picture? And they're the moments that I feel like they people can then hear what I'm saying, I hope, a little bit better because I'm not saying it from such an emotive direct place, but I'm the drawings or the creativity or the art are actually doing the job. So I find that fascinating.
Wow, I do too, and I find it very helpful for me because I also, for example, I think everyone and I certainly am in this category that right now I can't process what's going on in Israel and Gaza. I can't process it, and I've had a lot of history in the area, and I don't know what to do with it, you know, because I can't control it. And I think the idea of writing about it to try to deal with it, and then, like you said, I love that two-part process. First, it helps you process it, then it helps you share perhaps a way of dealing with it or talking about it or
Yeah. And I
investigating
drew
it.
I drew a picture then, about this thing about people speaking peace but selling arms. So like the voice is coming out one side, but then there's actual arms and the other side of the drawing, like going, we really need that thing that Mahatma Gandhi said about, being the change we wish to see in the world. There's no point in us speaking peace if on the other side we're selling arms or we're being warmongering in our ways. And I think for me, I don't like, when I hear people talk about, the war on climate or whatever, I'm like, no, we don't need any
It's
more
the wrong
war.
terminology.
We
Yeah.
need to really think about the words that we're using. And that's why I'm really happy with words where I'm talking about, well, how do we reconnect with each other? How do
Yeah.
we build community? How do we really connect with nature? And listen to what nature needs us to do, because too many times we're policy driven, or science is very important, but actually the connection and the creativity is in my opinion equally important.
I feel like this may be one of the most important conversations I've had all year. Because I do talk to people who are activists in many different ways. I love the word that you coined, artivist. This is your creation?
Well, you know what it is? I can't claim credit. I used it and I thought, oh, this is a new term. And then, of course, I Googled it and realized somebody had used it before me. So I'm not sure who I should credit for it. I found the word
Well,
activist. But I
you
had
can
I had done a project called The Artivist, and I didn't even realize that it was actually a thing pre-Google.
I love, yeah, pre-Google, the things we used to know pre-Google. Well, anyway, I think what you're demonstrating and how you're living and how you're sharing it is valuable. You said sometimes you don't value your own, you don't know how well your work is or how great your art is or something. Trust me, you are making a tremendous, tremendous difference. And I think it may be one of the most powerful ways to make change is really uh, the way that you're doing it and living it, and in just 100% passion is all going to one thing, and it's all interrelated. So I thank you. I guess it looks like we're probably at the end of our conversation. Went very quickly for me, but I just want to thank you so much, and I want to put all your links on the show notes. So I would encourage people to look at that and follow. And I hope that people can see that your film soon, and your future films as well.
The films will be shown on TG Cahar, so it's literally TG4 is how it appears on the web, and people can and look that up, and hopefully they'll have that player in their area.
TG and the number 4.
TG and the number 4, yeah, it's called TG
Okay.
Cahar. Yeah, so people can
Okay.
see films on that, and if not, they
Fantastic.
can contact me on my website if they want to.
Okay.
Contact page, and they can contact me, and maybe we can arrange a screening.
Ah, all right. I'm going to go sign up right now. All right. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for this. It's been wonderful and inspiring and hopeful and all the things we need, right? So it's been lovely meeting you. And I'm hoping with all my heart that I will be at Earth Rising next year. I'm trying to finally meet my family in Ireland. So I've got a few things we're going to try to connect, and that's one of them. So maybe we'll
Wonderful.
cross paths.
We'll see you there. That's great. Thank you so much for your work, Deborah, as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.